Good morning. Welcome to episode 3. In the second episode, I concluded saying that the highest potential of yogic perfection with respect to Annamaya Kosha is to be able to live without food and water. Now, that might put a lot of people off, saying it's very daunting. How is that possible? Okay, don't worry too much about that. The idea is to share the theory or the science behind this. So do you have the right notion of why are you doing what you are doing? Okay. There are several notions that keep going. A lot of people interpret it differently depending on their understanding. Like I'm also I'm based on my understanding, I'm interpreting it for you. So you can say this is another source of knowing. The Another source of knowing what is the science and what is the theory behind these things. So I want to reiterate again, don't get daunted or challenged by the idea that the ultimate potential perfect being for the Annamaya Kosha is to live without food and water. There can also be a counter argument saying that this body will anyway die. Nobody has lived for ever. Okay. So why spend too much time in perfecting the Annamaya Kosha? Okay. Valid question. 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 years you may live, but then ultimately everyone dies. So why bother about Annamaya Kosha and Pranamaya Kosha? Life is anyway going off. But the theory and science that I explained is from an ultimate position of yoga. And that is what Hinduism brings about. Okay. What does yoga mean? From Ashtanga Yoga, it is Kaivalyam, and therefore Nirvikalpa Samadhi, Nirbija Samadhi, what we call that, and then there is Savikalpa Samadhi, and then there is Dhyana, Dharana, Pratyahara, Pranayama, etc., keep going down. Okay. At lower levels, we are talking about the science, which is based on body and life. At higher levels, we'll talk about mind and then how we gradually move up to dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. And at samadhi level, Hinduism says that you will know the absolute truth, Kaivalyam. All Hindu practices take you from the lowest level to the highest level of yoga. The methodologies will change, the nomenclature will change, the structure will change. And to that extent, you may think we are talking about different things, but we are all talking about the same thing. I chose Ashtanga Yoga because it is easier to start with from an understanding point of view and most difficult to do. Okay. But even if it captures your attention and your interest and say, oh, there seems to be a science behind it, then you may be motivated to follow some yama, niyama, asana, pranayama to the extent of improving your perfection along these lines of science. And I bring in science again and again because today, in the current era, people go more by science than anything else. And I have got a complete mapping, as I said, in my spreadsheet, in my mind to start with. Okay. Starting from Annamaya Kosha to Parandama, I have got a complete mapping of science. Starting from metabolism to physiology to biology at the lowest level, moving up to nervous systems and intercellular functions and intracellular functions, moving up to what we call as mind, okay, to buddhi, intellectuals, which is basically neural networks that we have here, moving beyond that, okay, to matter, antimatter, electromagnetism, fundamental forces of energy, fundamental forces, particle physics, subparticle physics, matter, antimatter, dark energy, photons, matter annihilation, including quantum information science. I got a complete mapping. I'm not getting into so much. Okay. Moving up to the evolving theories of string theory, symmetry theory, supersymmetry, breaking, Swayambhu, as we say in our Purana. Everything is Swayambhu. And Swayambhu, that's a term called in science called spontaneous symmetry breaking at the highest level, which is supposed to have caused the entire cosmos. I'm not getting into that level now. Maybe 50, 60, 100 episodes later we'll reach there, assuming we do so many episodes. But right now there's a whole science that I can map, modern science to our practices, and those practices to those theories and philosophies that we have. Okay. It might motivate therefore some of you to see whether you can make some modifications to your nature of food that you take, the frequency of food that you take, make it more sattvic, more pranic, so that you can improve your wellness with asanas, pranayama to start with. Now we'll get on to the higher levels of pranayama later. Okay. Because you had to introduce the idea of chakras and how it works and so on and so forth when you want to do pranayama, and how we gradually improve it to higher levels of perfection of pranayama. And then beyond pranayama, we'll talk about Shakti, okay, Shakti Pitas, Shiva Pitas, and all that stuff, and then link it to biology, and then quantum biology and all that. Quantum biology is a very, very nascent science, so there is not so much I have, but quantum physics is a very advanced science. Okay, we can link them together. So this is a path that one can take, okay, which has been an ancient wisdom, ancient knowledge, ancient practice that we have had in Hinduism. I can also see parallels of this in Christianity and Islam also. Okay, not that I'm just because I'm a Hindu, it's easy for me to talk about Hinduism, but I have seen parallels to this in Christianity and Islam. What portions they have adopted, and I can map it to both Hinduism on one side and science on the other side. So you can have a kind of interplay of religions and sciences, okay, on this. So the whole purpose of putting this is not to make you a big yogi who can do nirvikalpa samadhi, but it can definitely be a motivation. If you can, please do, please try. But if you can't, at least you will know where everything fits in. That give you some clarity, and some parts you can at least adapt to the extent that you can, like food habits, yama niyama. Yama niyama and hatha yoga itself, forget pranayama. Yama niyama and hatha yoga itself can give you a better quality of life, even if you are not becoming a yogi. Okay. That's the whole point for you to understand in this. Okay. This is a short episode because I want to conclude so that you don't get into a mistaken notion that it is not for you. That's a science which is meant for you, meant for me, meant for human beings. Same science applies to animals as well. The same nadi system, Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, applies to animals as well. They may not have an advanced mind or an intellect, but the animal nature, what we call as the reptilian, in our relevant to human beings. For example, let me say, there is a biologist who said our brain has got three parts. One is a reptilian part, other is a mammalian part, and then it's a human part. We are a mix of these three. We are mammals, definitely. We are reptilians, definitely, because we have a backbone and everything is around the backbone. Okay, and you are like reptiles. When you lie down like this, flat, with your head down, you are actually lying like a crocodile or a snake or whatever, or a lizard, frog, whatever. They are all reptiles. Okay, so there is a reptilian part which is supported by the skeletal, muscular part of our human nature, our human being, human form, human content. Okay, but then there is a mammalian part in terms of reproduction and how they reproduce is a mammalian part, and there's also an associated emotional part with that. Mammals have a better emotional part, and humans have the best emotional part compared to all other animals. If you take the lowest reptilian to human, there's a whole range that we have in terms of. And we are a combination of a reptilian component, we have a combination of a mammalian component, and we also have a human component, which is mind. It's a mind and intellect compared to other emotional beings. Okay, reptilian, other beings or other animals which have reptilian and emotional part, but less of an mind intellect part. Some animals also have memory. For example, people say the elephant has a huge memory. Okay. Not all reptiles have a huge memory. Okay. So, from a biological part of being, there is a certain things that we'll talk about later. Okay, how to overcome overcome, when I say how to master, how to control your reptilian part, how to control your mammalian part, how to control your human part. Okay, and how to control beyond your human part. Okay, so reptilian is all muscular skeleton stuff, mammalian is all reproductive and emotional stuff. Okay, human is all mind. When I say mind, it's not only mind, it's a combination of reptilian, mammalian, mind. And there's a little more of an extra stuff which we have already, which others don't have, which is consciousness. Yeah. All this will go to higher levels. So, if you have not mastered your reptilian part, you are still going to have this food requirement. And if you don't have mastered your mammalian part, you are going to have emotional elements, okay, reproductive urges, and so on and so forth. And if you don't master your human part, okay, the mental, intellectual knowledge, understanding part is still going to be weak. Okay, and that is why the mind is called manas. Okay. And the word man, okay, is very, very core to understanding why we are called man. Okay, it comes from man, mind, manas. For us, mind is the most advanced compared to other forms of animals. But then we have more to go in terms of consciousness. Okay. Awareness, attention, where dhyana, the word dhyana comes to that. So the higher levels of dharana, dhyana will take you after mastering the reptilian part, the mammalian part, and the human part. When you use dharana and dhyana, okay, you will move to mastering the mind part and the consciousness part, and then to samadhi, okay, where you go to know the ultimate truth, not through body and mind, but through consciousness. Chitta vritti nirodha, Ashtanga Yoga starts with that. Okay, we'll discuss that later. It's a whole book, it's a whole system, but this is the building blocks that we talk about. Okay, the first block that we talked about was Annamaya Pranamaya Kosha, for which we need to have proper yama and niyama, at least with relevance to Annamaya and Pranamaya Kosha, which means you need to have the right food to start with, right attitudes to yourself as well as to life, right way to behave as far as conduct yourself as well as to the rest of the world, that is yama niyama, food habits, food frequencies, no food frequencies, which is upavasa, not having food. Okay, that's also important, because as we said, having food is not the way to attain perfection. When you reach perfection, you are not going to require food at all, because prana is going to come from outside. Okay, so you need to therefore focus on no food frequencies as well. Okay, and pranayama is how do I widen the nadis, and how do I direct the flows and chakras and all that stuff. Okay, these are basics that can help you in terms of a well regulated life and living. But that's only half of the whole story. The remaining half is how do you transcend from this from manasa, manava, manushan, manushi, whatever you call that, okay, to being higher beings, which is based on your strength of your consciousness. Too early to talk about it, but we'll come to that as we go along. Okay, but then this is the path that you can choose if you want to choose your highest potential, which is in Kaivalyam, okay, or Paramapada, okay, or Paramatma, merger with Paramatma, Vaikunta, Kailasha, whatever you call that. We'll come all that to later. These are all very high level stuff. We are now starting with the LKG syllabus. Okay. You have to shift first. First understand that this is how it fits into the whole story, the whole journey. Okay. And that perspective I thought I will cover in this episode 3 so that you don't get bewildered by what I told you in episode 2. Okay. Good luck.